with the first pick.
Thunderstruck! Thunderstruck! Yeah, Thunderstruck!
Welcome to the Fantasy Rant podcast. I am Dan Baker, accompanied by my fellow co-hosts, Mason Beck and Evan Gooding. We did it. We got through one. No mess ups.
Let's go.
Here we will discuss everything fantasy football, trades, lineup decisions, talk to and I'm already messing up again. Mock drafts and more here on Fantasy Rant. On today's episode, we will cover news around the league and our dynasty running back rankings. And before we dip into that, Evan, I believe you left us off with a fun stat last episode.
I did. I mean, fun, I guess, is a questionable term, I guess, I used for that. But so I said, what wide receiver got less than 4 points in 6 out of 18 games while being drafted in the top 3 rounds of a startup? And without having everybody, wait, let the suspense build. But the answer is T. Higgins. T. Higgins is the guy. And I know Dan has something to say about that.
I just didn't. After we looked back after the episode, I was like, okay, who was in the 3rd round that could have had this many dud games? And then I came across T. Higgins. I was like, wait a second. T. Higgins left like 3 or 4 games with injuries. And in those games, there was 4 games that were cut short where he had either a 26% snap share or less. And one of them was the Damar Hamlin game. He did have – Week 18 was a legitimately bad game where he played over 80% of the snaps and still had less than 4 points. I believe it was 1.7 points. But, yeah, I didn't love the stat. Obviously, I am big on T. Higgins. Obviously, Evan is not very big on T. Higgins, so not such a fun stat for me. But I'll see if I can bring a little bit more fun of a stat at the end of the episode this week.
That's interesting. You were able to come to the defense on all 6 of those reasons. Do you have all the 6 of the reasons how he had that same stat line the year before, too?
So the year before,
I knew you had it.
I got it up because I knew you would do it.
I also expanded this 2 years in a row, 6 out of 18 games under 4 points.
So last year it was 4 games where it was cut short either due to injury or Damar Hamlin. There was 1 bad game, and then one of the 6 was a bye week. It doesn't count.
Everybody gets one. Everybody gets one.
Everyone gets one.
Nobody gets the perfect season.
And then in the year before, he had weeks 3 and 4 and 18. He had a 0% snap share, missed either due to injury or they either clinched and didn't need him. And then in week 10, bye week. In week 11, 1 bad game. So in my opinion, T. Higgins has 1 truly bad game per year. But Justin Jefferson last year had 2 games where he was under 4.5 points. Like, are we going to call Justin Jefferson bad? Of course not. It's just a volatile position.
True. I mean, are we going to call him injury prone too? There's also the draft sharks. Draft sharks did have Michael Thomas with 10% less chance of getting injured than T. Higgins this year.
What were they at? Like 100% and 90%?
91 and 81. 91 and 81.
So pretty close.
Yeah.
That's pretty bad. But, well, we'll see if we can have a little bit more of a lighthearted energy with my fun stat at the end of it this week. Mm-hmm. Mason, you got it next week, so get ready for your fun stat next week. But, yeah, before we dive into anything else, I just want to say thank you to everyone tuning in to the Stadium Rant Original. If you like our content, you should subscribe to our free newsletter, which will include exclusive interviews, articles of the week, and more. You can sign up at StadiumRant.com by clicking on any article. Give that article a read, but right at the top of it is the newsletter that you can sign up for free. All right, without any further ado, Mason, what do you got for the news?
All right, so for this week for news, the first one, last Sunday, Javonte Williams was asked at a football camp that he hosted with Pat Surtain if he would be medically cleared for training camp, and Javonte Williams says that he feels like he's ready to go. Obviously, there's been a lot of speculation on when he would be ready for the season. Whether it even be week 1, whether it be preseason or where it's going to do. And I think this just absolutely boosts his value, makes you not worry about the injury as much. that it's a little earlier that he's going to be ready to go than a lot of people were assuming.
Yeah, this was I couldn't believe it when I heard this. Everyone's been talking about because it's the ACL and PCL that it's going to be a longer injury. A lot of people have been referencing J.K. Dobbins taking a long time to get back in. And that's definitely where I thought this was heading. I mean, obviously, this is a player talking. He's going to be optimistic about his own timeline. It would be more alarming if he said, "No, I'm definitely not getting back until halfway through the season." But with that being said, if he's aiming for training camp and he can get back even by week 3 or 4, that's earlier than I was expecting him. So I think this is a big piece of news and could drastically change his ADP and Samaje Perine ADP.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was always scratching my head when Samaje Perine got drafted, and then being touted as like somebody who could, be the bell cow back there for the time being. But I don't even see that being the case. I hope that Javonte is ready to go. I want to see him on the field. I think that him being on the field is good for fantasy football.
Agreed.
And we had heard like little rumors of like Dalvin Cook also being interested, or Broncos being interested in Dalvin Cook. And I mean, if Javonte is really ready for week 1 or 2, do you guys think? I mean, I kind of think that drops Dalvin out of contention for them to go for, because if he's ready to run, then I don't think they need Cook.
I completely agree. Yeah, and in a similar type of situation, it seems like the team gaining the most traction is the Jets, who had Brees Hall injured with an ACL, and I think it was a meniscus tear as well, about 3 or 4 weeks later from Javonte's injury. That would kill Brees Hall's redraft value, and depending on the contract, could definitely hurt his dynasty value as well. Um, and I know that one of us has Brees Hall as their number one overall dynasty running back. We won't spoil who quite yet, but keep your eyes peeled for that. All right.
And then, so another piece of news we got today is that the Chiefs head coach Andy Reid was saying that Sky Moore has been one of the most highest targeted receivers in offseason program so far, and that he thinks that he's made a big jump in this offseason. I mean, I've been a big fan of Tony, which obviously this hurts that case, especially if it's coming from the head coach. But I mean, we've seen plenty of years in the past. We've talked about it, even how Kansas City will always overhype a receiver and then they're just mediocre.
Right. I do think it ends up being everybody will have their week type of situation in Kansas City, but I do think that Sky Moore is the more traditional wide receiver that could end up being a little bit more reliable than the rest of the other boomer bust wide receivers on that team.
Yeah, I mean, this definitely doesn't help the case for get your paper ready. Where's Justin Ross?
Hey, did it this week
as well as
Jesus last week.
But I'm still a believer, and there's more talent on the other ends of the receiver corps than Sky Moore. Let's go. Keep
13.
Let's go.
13.
Let's rack them up. Let's rack them up.
All right, no, we gotta fix that. Okay. No, yeah, Justin Ross. He offers the big body. Sky Moore can do a little bit of everything. We were talking about his reception perception earlier on the Dynasty wide receiver ranking show. He does a little bit of everything well. Kadarius Toney isn't quite the route runner he is, but if you get him the ball in open space, game over. So I like it.
And then for some more healthy running back news, that Jonathan Taylor was recently sidelined during the Colts minicamp after undergoing a arthroscopic debridement. I might have said that wrong. Just to clean up his ankle injury from last season. I mean, it's minicamp. Him getting sidelined during that isn't that bad. But the Colts owner, Jim Irsay, said that he's going to be completely healed up by the start of training camp. So, I mean, Taylor healthy going into the regular season
that's big. That's big.
I
I
mean,
mean, I think that we all expected him to be
Yeah.
healthy going into the season, but just getting that reassurance, like it hurt a lot of people. Jonathan Taylor was the number one overall pick in redraft leagues last year, and probably most dynasty leagues. Him taking that tumble in midseason really hurt a lot of teams with that number one pick from getting into their fantasy championships. So I think it is just a nice, reassuring piece of news. Nothing we didn't expect, but definitely good to hear.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
all right, and then more injury news. Darnell Mooney for the Bears said that he will be ready to roll when Bears open up their training camp. So
I personally love that. I think Darnell has gone, like, I get it. He's no longer the number one. He is on a very run heavy team. Um, Hopefully that changes a little bit. They start to get more towards league average in terms of their passing percentage. I do think that Darnell Mooney he should have a little bit more value than people are giving him, especially in Dynasty. With him being a pretty young wide receiver still, he doesn't need, he's not one of those wide receivers that needs 6, 8, 10 targets in order to show his value. He can do it on those longer plays, especially if he's going to now finally, for the first time in his career, be treated as a wide receiver too. I think he's an excellent wide receiver too. I think we all know he's not a wide receiver one, but with DJ Moore there, even Cole Kmet taking some of the pressure off of Mooney, I think this could go a long ways.
Yeah, and unless this passing offense changes a ton, that ready to roll is going to be rolling downhill for me. I think he's going to be
still out
rolling
on him?
downhill, stocks tumbling for me.
Okay.
I see why he's falling in the ADP, and the years could just go by. You could be stuck in that wide receiver 2 role, fringe wide receiver 3, and just not be getting enough attention to make him productive enough.
yeah. I think it all just depends on if Fields improves his passing game. I mean, if he adds a little more in there, I think Mooney could, potentially be maybe wide receiver 3 range for fantasy wise.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think he'll ever step up into a wide receiver 2 role, especially with DJ Moore there. I just and Kmet, and I just never see the passing volume necessarily being there for Mooney.
You're right. The volume is not there.
Yeah.
I mean, disregard my Twitter handle for a second. But even without the volume being there, I still do think that the passing game creeps towards average, and that Fields is a good downfield thrower, and that's what Mooney excels at, downfield targets. So that's what I'd like to see, but we'll see how it goes. They might still be super run heavy.
All right. And then, so for our last piece of news, it's something that we've been waiting on to hear about, the Alvin Kamara situation. Today or yesterday, I believe, he pleaded to no contest to a misdemeanor charge stemming from a Las Vegas nightclub incident. And then he was sentenced to community service and $100,000 in damages. The reduced formal proceedings ensure the San Antonio back will avoid jail time, but he could still be disciplined by the league. So, I mean, jail time avoidance is obviously good for him and fantasy wise. But the suspensions could still be there, which I think we've all kind of known that could be coming for a while. I think definitely the fact that, charges are going to be dropped, no jail time, I think that will lower the suspension time for sure. But I don't know. I still see him missing 4 or 6 weeks.
That's exactly what I was going to say. 4 to 6 weeks is what I still see that happening. I mean, especially with it being the Pro Bowl weekend where this happened, like the NFL is going to want to make sure that they don't encourage this to happen in the future. So I also agree 4 to 6 weeks, I think, is most likely to come from the NFL. Like you said, though, obviously good that he's not in jail for his fantasy production at least. You know, I still don't think this has a huge effect on his dynasty value, but obviously in redraft, this is going to drop him a ton. You see him going in 7th or 8th round sometimes, usually 7th, but sometimes slips to the 8th. Yeah.
Yeah. As a stakeholder with Kamara, I'm bracing for impact, but I am expecting him to still get heavily involved in that offense afterwards. I don't think that this is going to be something that they look away from him for the rest of the year because of this.
Yeah, they pay him too much not to involve him.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, Kamara still produces, and I think Saints are going to win that division. So why wouldn't they use the producer when they're trying to make a run?
Absolutely. Like, he's still better than Jamal Williams for sure. And I feel like some like dynasty Devi heads are going to say Kendre Miller, but he's still better than Kendre Miller right now, even though he's the older back. All
I do
right.
love Kendre right now, though. I do.
Yeah. All right. Without any further ado, let's get into these dynasty rankings. All right. So to kick us off, we have our dynasty rankings up this week. We've made this spreadsheet. You can see how we have all of our different tiers. They're broken apart by these grays. Then we also compare them in this red column to Fantasy Pros expert consensus ranking. So we have both mine, Mason's, and Evan's rankings, as well as our Fantasy Rant consensus ranking. So just us three, the average of our rankings. And then we compare each of those to Fantasy Pros, just so you get a little bit of a feel for how the general market is feeling the general expert consensus ranking. So in our first tier, we have Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, Christian McCaffrey, and Jonathan Taylor. Of us, we have one person that has Jonathan Taylor pretty far outside of that number 4 ranking. We got Evan ranking him at number 9. Evan, what do you have to say about Jonathan ranking being your RB9?
Yeah, well, I could be wrong about this. He's still very young. He's 24, and he's an efficient runner, and that's typically something that I would rank highly. But last year, looking into it, he only played 10 games due to various injuries. It wasn't just the ankle that we talked about earlier in the news. But and of those 10 games he did play, 3 of those games he underperformed 6 points or less. So that's not great either. He's on the final year of his contract. So
how many games? Just out of curiosity, I just didn't catch it.
3 of those games with health.
Okay.
All 3 of those games, 2 were healthy snap counts above 70%.
Absolutely, yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, so he's on the final year of his contract, and RB Outlook is in shambles right now for valued contracts at the position. He had Matt Ryan as a pass catcher last year, but he dropped about 10% in catch percentage with him. So that didn't make sense to me because Matt Ryan was pretty good at checking down the ball, I feel like. Talking about the draft was not great for him either. Anthony Richardson is great for the Colts, I think, but he brings a ton of question marks. Dan Mason, how many rushing attempts do you think this guy's going to get? Anthony Richardson.
I would say bare minimum 5-6 a game.
Yeah, I'm seeing 10. I see 10 per game. And
one of the things I was going to bring up later, Shane Steichen did run the most run pass options in the league last year.
Yeah.
So that does create a lot of opportunities for him to tuck the ball and run if he's not sure. And I feel like with a big body like that, he might rely on himself more than he relies on him being able to make the correct read.
Exactly. So, he's not going to be checking down as much as the previous, veteran passers that Jonathan Taylor's had for the past 3 years.
Yeah. No, absolutely not. Yeah, especially between what you said, Rivers, Wentz, and Matt Ryan.
So I could see a decrease in both rushing attempts and passing attempts, or catching attempt targets. So I just got a lot of skepticism towards him right now.
I could see less carries for him, but I don't think it could help the efficiency of the carries because we've seen Taylor been the sole focus of defenses trying to stop for years now because they haven't had a solid QB and very spotty play. Yeah. And now that they have, Richardson's a developmental. a guy. He's not going to come out and be pro Hall of Famer day one. He's not going to be like that. But I mean, it could still help Taylor take the load off his back a little bit. And
Absolutely. Those are like the two notes that I have on this player for who we're bringing up first. Is I was like, Richardson may not help in the passing game, like Evan brought up, but I do think that he will help Jonathan Taylor's efficiency with those
Yeah.
RPOs. Even if defenders aren't completely thrown off, I still think that even if they're just off a little bit, if they're off balance, Jonathan Taylor's a big boy. He will run through them or run around them. I think it definitely will help his efficiency, but you're right. Richardson will definitely vulture more touchdowns around the red zone than any of his past 3 QBs did.
For sure. And they did, draft Evan Hall in the 5th round. Not really concerning. Just something to monitor if they do try to get him even minimally involved or something.
Right. New Naeem Hines, essentially. Yeah. But we'll see how much they throw the ball. Philly threw the ball the least in the league last year. So if Shane Steichen brings that type of mindset and scheme over to the Colts, then like you said, he could definitely see a lot less targets from the backfield.
Yep.
All right. In our tier 2, we have Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, Kenneth Walker, and Travis Etienne. I have Gibbs at running back 6. Evan, you have him at running back 4.
Mhm.
Mason at running back 8. Mason, why do you despise Jahmyr Gibbs so much? Oh, two rankings below.
I don't think putting him at the 8 ranking would classify as despising.
No, I'm joking. I'm joking. Yeah.
I mean, I still think he's a great fantasy option. Don't get me wrong there. I'm just not going to put him, like I believe I have him in tier 3. Yeah. I'm not going to put him in tier 2 because I think there's better options, and he's also got some limit years these upcoming years. Montgomery signed the 3-year deal. Montgomery's only 26. Looking at his contract, it was only like 18 million over the next 3 years, so he would be easy to cut and get rid of. But if he's producing, taking a $6 million hit or whatever isn't going to be like crushing to a team salary cap. So I don't see Detroit moving on from Montgomery during these 3 years. And then we also have seen reports that Gibbs will be used more like a receiver and not really as much a running back, which, losing carries, receivers could kind of, when you get that, and they have a lot of talented receivers like Laporta, they just added, who I think is going to be a stud tight end. They have Amon, they have Jameson Williams. They even added Marvin Jones, which who knows how long he'll actually be there and how productive he'll be. But I mean, if he's not getting as much ground carries, how consistent is he going to be? I think he with like, if he really is this receiver role that I've heard Dan Campbell say a little bit about, he might be a boom or bust player, and I don't think that really gets him into like a tier 2.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so my tier 2 is just a little bit bigger, and he's just outside of tier 1 for me. So it's just the youth. He's 21.3 years old right now. They took him, I believe it was the 12th overall draft pick.
Yep.
And they just everyone saw that video of how excited the draft room got. They literally erupted because they took a running back at the 12th pick. Everybody else is like, what the hell are you doing? And they, to me, clearly seem like they have a role for him. And with having Jared Goff be their quarterback, he's not mobile. He's going to check down a decent amount. So even if he isn't running out of the slot or running a ton of designed routes that are solely for him, I think there will be plenty of dump offs for him to go his way. I do agree with you. I don't think Montgomery is going anywhere for the next 2 years. His dead cap is about 6.4 million after 2024. I believe you're saying that. And then after that, it's down to around $2 million, though. And they'll have to pay him in the high 7s. So it's a backloaded contract. I do think he'll be gone after 2 years. But and Montgomery's only going to be 27 through 2024. So like you said, through at least 2 years, he will be there.
Yeah, I think I actually have Gibbs the highest right now, and just from historical perspective, how can you go wrong with the running backs that have come from that college, like Alabama, Najee Harris, Derrick Henry, Jacobs, Damian Harris, Kenny Drake, like those are all. It's just a great system that they have in place, and I trust them coming out of it. And I don't know, he's a great highlight tape guy too. I can't get enough of those highlights as well.
It's
So,
going to be really fun looking at like all of the historic greats that have come from Alabama, but all of the crazy busts that have gone to Detroit. Like there is a Barry Sanders curse, and it's going to be interesting to see which one outpowers which with this pick. So,
yeah.
all right, moving on to our next tier, we have Tony Pollard, Josh Jacobs, Austin Eckler, Najee Harris, Ramondre Stevenson, and Nick Chubb. One of us has Austin Eckler in their tier 1, despite him being 28 years old right now. We got Evan with a ranking of RB6 for Austin Eckler.
Yep. Well, I should probably preface this with the fact that I am a Chargers fan.
Get your bias out of here, bro.
Yeah, well, just get that out of the way off the bat, so everybody can digest this with that in consideration. But he's also the highest targeted running back in the past 2 years, and last year it wasn't even close. CMC was the second most, and he averaged 6.4 targets per game. But Austin Eckler had 7.5 targets per game. Now, I'm not expecting that to stay there. I do think he's going to come down to earth there a little bit, but I don't think it's going to drop substantially. I think he's going to be right around 5.5, 6 targets per game, and he gets the rush attempts over 60% of the time in the red zone, and all of the success that he had last year was without our first round talent offensive tackle Rashawn Slater. Rashawn Slater only played 2.5 games last year, and this will improve Austin Eckler's efficiency. And not to mention, but if the Chargers saw a problem with Austin Eckler, they would have addressed it in the draft. This draft class was absolutely loaded with running back, and we just, I think, signed somebody to our practice squad. I'm pretty sure who's that guy trending right now? I see him on the sleeper. I forgot his name.
I think that's only for you Charger heads. I didn't see anybody on my Twitter.
He's trending on sleeper right now.
No, I agree with you with the obviously they didn't get the opportunity to, but before the draft, my ideal landing spot for Gibbs was the Chargers. I thought that would have been perfect. Replace the old with the new. Eckler can stay there for this next year, but then Gibbs takes over in that Eckler role. I agree with what you said that his targets have to come down a little bit. Last year, they obviously had Keenan Allen and Mike Williams injured for parts of the year, so they were really relying on Eckler just to move the ball at all. It was depressing watching the Chargers offense go from what it was and what it can be to just this like low A-dot check down offense.
You have to say it out loud?
I mean, it's true. And I do think that will change with you guys bringing in Kellen Moore.
Yeah, I do too. That new regime, that's also, the one question mark I would put to like the one thing that could change for Eckler's game this year. But I don't know. I don't see it hurting.
Yeah, it definitely should not hurt him.
Yeah, I mean, I think his age is just the big the talent is there. It's been obvious it's there for years. I mean, he's a free agent though after this year, and I mean, I think he'll find it a lot easier than these other guys. But we've seen like Cook, Fournette, Zeke, like all these vets that once they hit that certain age, it's harder for them to find a good role on a team, and so he might be amazing this year, do what he's been doing. But what's it going to be after that? Are they going to keep him? Is he going to go somewhere else and split? Is he not going to be the dominant workhorse anymore? I think there's a lot of what if factors with Eckler. I don't think he's a for sure for more than 1 year.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head with that because, his role is secure here. Evan, like you said, he gets the receiving work, he gets the goal line work. They haven't brought anybody else in. But, yes, he will be 29 years old next year. That's pretty old for a running back going on to a new contract. He was an undrafted free agent coming into this and hasn't made a lot of money over his career. So I think he will be searching for that big contract, kind of like he was this year, and didn't find any takers, which is tough
Yeah.
for the player. I like Austin Eckler a ton, and I hope he goes out and finds that bag somewhere because he is a great player. But I don't know if he's going to with the way the NFL just looks at running backs right now. It's not very favorable.
Yeah, it hasn't been great too. Like he has, been pretty vocal about not being happy too, and I don't never really like that. That's never really a good sign for a player's future in that organization too. But yeah, my gut's just telling me he's going to be a Charger forever, literally. Like
Yeah.
never ever.
Before we get out of here, I thought about I forgot to bring this up at the time, but both of y'all have Kenneth Walker very high in my opinion. Our expert, like our Fantasy Rant consensus ranking, we got him at 7. That's because I have him down at 12. Mason, you have him at 5. Evan, you have him at 3.
Yes.
3 is crazy to me. Fantasy Pros has him over at 11. So what are we thinking here, having him in each of you in the top 5? I'm just curious before we move on.
He killed it last year. He's a rookie. I mean, that was simple to it. I mean, he was a rookie. Yeah, they brought in another rookie, but I mean,
In
did
the
he want
early
to play
second
last year?
round, Zach Charbonnet's a beast, bro.
I mean,
So
he got. Did Walker get better draft capital than Zach Charbonnet?
They were both second round.
But I believe Walker was a high second round. Charbonnet was a low second round.
We can nitpick where their draft pick happened to fall.
And Kenneth Walker also received 100% of the carries in the 5, within the 5 for the red zone too. So he's who they're going to be putting in there without a doubt.
So you're speaking to his regression case because there's no way he can get that many carries.
They're going to give him the ball in the 5.
Bigger bruising back. That's also better at pass catching.
I don't know about bigger bruising back. Do you have anything to justify that?
I love Walker. He is fast as hell. But it's close.
Yeah.
But he is not the threat inside of the red zone, especially if you want to keep the duality of maybe we're passing. Because Charbonnet is a better pass catcher. He is a bigger back. And like if you want to keep them guessing, then Charbonnet is the guy to keep in there.
I just don't see him as the bruise. I think that he's going to be more like the lightning pass catching role. And they brought in Kenny McIntosh out of Georgia, who is also more of a pass catching role too. So I mean, I think that he's also.
So you're saying Walker will be left with no pass catching because they're both better pass catchers.
I don't think he needs it as much. He's just an absolute breakaway runner, and he's gonna. I can see him getting 15 carries a game, and if he gets a couple targets here and there, that'd be great. But I think with those 15 carries per game, he'll be fine for years to come.
Don't get me wrong. I don't hate Kenneth Walker. He's still an RB1 for me. He's just the back end RB1, especially knowing that the next 3 years of his career are going to be split with Zach Charbonnet. So, like, these other guys that I have ahead of him are guys who I just think have a bigger chunk of the pie. Like guys who are also very young, but are going to be leaned on in good offenses as well for the most part. Yeah, I would say outside of maybe Najee, they're all part of great offenses for the most part. So I don't know. I just don't see Kenneth Walker as a top 5 guy. I could be talked into getting him a little bit higher if we see like Jimmy G's not going to be a thing this year. They'll go above Josh Jacobs. If Kenny Pickett doesn't take a step up, they'll go above Najee Harris. If Travis Etienne's really splitting like 50-50 work with Tanks Bigsby, I could see him getting above Etienne. I would say Ramondre would probably be the end of that list for me. But we'll see how it goes. Kenneth Walker is incredibly talented. I just, without the receiving work, I don't see him being top 5.
Well, he still might get some. I don't think he's not going to get a target then for this whole entire year. I don't think Zach Charbonnet and Kenny McIntosh are going to take everything, but okay.
I'm looking it up now. I had to look it up. How many receptions this man got?
They just had nobody. They had no depth behind Kenneth Walker, so they had to add. Their hand was forced.
They've always been fine having like Travis Homer though, and like guys like that as their receiving back and do it. Like That's always been fine. He had 27 receptions last year, and I think that is pretty much chalked up to him being the only guy back there.
Yeah, and
You
that
know,
was he did. How much did he play before the injuries propelled him into the
I would
position?
have to look it up as well, but I think Rashad Penny got injured in week 5. I
Yeah.
could be wrong on that.
So
But
I
I'm
mean,
gonna.
so if you expand that out, he probably gets maybe 45 targets throughout the season, 45, 50, which is
That's a lot in 5 weeks. Yeah, Penny got injured in week 5. If we say he got 27 targets, let's say they all came in those games. That's 12 games, 27 targets. It's a little bit over 2 a week. So let's say he gets now 37, 40. That'd
Yeah.
be the max he would get in a year. But now he's got a new guy coming in. And like you said, they got 2 different running backs with pass catching prowess.
Yeah.
So I just don't see that being a part of his game, personally. All right. With that, let's move on to our next running back. We have in tier 4. Starts off with Javonte Williams at running back 15, Damian Pierce, Derrick Henry, Rashad White, J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, and Miles Sanders. I am the one who stands out on my Miles Sanders ranking. I have Miles Sanders at RB16. You guys have him at RB20 and RB23. And the Fantasy Pros consensus ranking does agree with you guys with a ranking of RB21. I will say I am higher on Miles Sanders because of this new contract. This contract is very nice. There's nobody of concern to me. I think Chuba Hubbard has his time had his time to prove whether they want to move on with him. And if they did, they would not have signed Miles Sanders to a 4-year, $25 million contract. This $25.4 million contract over the 4 years makes him the 12th highest paid running back in the league. Carolina last year, they had the running play percentage that was the 5th most in the league. They ran the ball on 49.49% of their plays. So nearly 50% of their plays. They did bring in Frank Reich, so maybe that doesn't stay exactly at where it is, but they still don't have elite wide receivers to throw the ball to. Right now, it's Adam Thielen, DJ Shark, and Jonathan Mingo. And then maybe Terrace Marshall Jr. for those who still believe in him. They're not exciting wide receivers. I think they're going to stay around the running play percentage that they had last year, maybe creep a little bit more towards league average, but I still think they're going to be in at least the high 40s for running play percentage. That being said, we also saw Frank Reich from 2019 to 2022, so the last 4 years with the Colts. He ran a zone scheme, a zone scheme. Miles Sanders ran a zone scheme in more plays every single year that he was on the Eagles. So he found a player that excels well in this scheme. They went and got him. They signed him to a long contract. He just turned 26 years old. So I'm not saying he's going to hold up for all 4 years and he's going to be a stud when he's 30. But for the next 2 to 3 years, they have their guy. Last year, he ran for 1,269 yards. It was the 5th most in the NFL. He also ran for 11 touchdowns, and the Eagles only ran him on 47.6% of the Eagles' running plays. Granted, a lot of that is going to Jalen Hurts, but that's still not a lot. That's under half of their plays. If like we got Bryce Young as their new quarterback. He's mobile. He is not a scrambling quarterback. He's nothing like Jalen Hurts, especially at his size. They don't want him running like off script plays where he's just going to be taking shots. So I do believe that Bryce Young, especially like we just saw in his last year at Alabama, Jahmyr Gibbs was the number one reception leader on the Crimson Tide. So if he continues that trend, Miles Sanders will get more targets. And we've already heard about Frank Reich and their owner literally in a video in the meeting saying, like, hey, remember that rookie season where you got 50 plus? Well, get used to that. Like, we're going to need you to do that some more. So between the youth, the contract, the rushing ownership of how many carries he's going to get, with nobody being a threat to him, and then an increase in passing work, I really see that he can take a true step up in these next 2 to 3 years.
Wouldn't it be great if we could get that transparency, like that video for like every player?
Yes.
God,
Coach meeting. Like, hey, this is what we want to do with you, man.
But I gotta say, man, dude, he's probably out of all the aging running backs, he's probably the one guy who has the most potential to move up my board. You know, I definitely don't hate him. I love his situation. I just don't think the situation is going to stay. And you know, I gotta see how he does in that system, and make sure that the situation stays before I'm able to.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
There's a chance.
There's a chance.
Yeah, I'm pretty in the same boat. Like, I don't think the situation's very stable. I think he got one good year of him for sure. And depending on how he does, if he explodes as a workhorse running back, you know, I'd say that he's better. You know, he'll move up my list as well. But I mean, I think if he has, you know, just a good or around an average season, they'll be looking to draft one pretty early next year. So I think
Even
it's
with
just
that contract. That's like one of the biggest contracts you'll find in the off season.
Yeah, I mean,
they got nobody behind him. And that's also why I love his situation, because they got nobody behind him.
Right.
So they're gonna have to get some sort of, you know, handcuff there, you know.
I mean, Hubbard's there for another 2 years. I think he's a fine backup, but like nowhere near Sanders' top side. So
because he did so good when CMC left.
Yeah, they did bring in Deonta. Little diet Derrick Henry over there putting in that work.
Oh, you took advantage of that last year too.
I love Deonta Foreman. Yeah. I love him as a player. I do not love his situation. Yeah. I mean, he's not on the docket today, but we can touch on that as we get by him.
True. Oh, man.
All right. Before we move on to our next piece, Mason, you got a little bit here?
So yeah, before we move on, we're going to stop and drop a little ad read. It's going to be for the Gritty Gamblers podcast. It's all about cashing that ticket, and StadiumRant has you covered. Our gamblers do just that with Austin, Matt, and Carlson getting after it with big plays on Mondays and Fridays at 9 p.m. So if you get the chance to stop by and check out their stream, it's a good one. So might as well get some good picks and maybe win some money.
All right. On to our next tier. So we have Aaron Jones, Isaiah Pacheco, Dalvin Cook, Alexander Madison, Cam Akers, James Cook, David Montgomery, Zach Charbonnet, Joe Mixon, AJ Dillon, and that ends our tier 5 at RB31. In our tier 5, we have AJ Dillon. There was a bit of a discrepancy between our rankings and Mason's here. Mason, you have him up at RB23. I have him at RB35, and Evan also has him at RB35. I thought you were a San Francisco fan. What is this love for the Green Bay Packers?
Well, I don't really love the Packers at all, but I think, and it's not necessarily Dillon being with the Packers either. So there's two situations I think that he goes through. One of them is Aaron Jones is old. He's got 2 years left on his contract. Yeah, he might be a little hard to move with the dead cap that would cause. But if they find a way to move Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon could move in because they are kind of moving into a rebuild sort. So the younger back would obviously be the better situation for them if they're rebuilding. If not, if they decide to move on from it, Dillon, this is his last year in his contract. And I think he's still young enough. He's only 25, I believe. That's still young enough to get a good 3-4 year contract out of, where you can go produce somewhere else if some team really believes in him. And I think he would be trying to look for that team that would really give him the chance to prove. And then I think even for this season, like Love, Jordan Love stepping in, we don't know how well he's going to done in his few short appearances. He's not looked promising, which I don't like saying because I like Love. But
Dude,
they could rely a lot on the run game. So Dylan, that could be a split backfield. But Jones is getting older, could give Dylan more carries. But if it is a run heavy offense, Dylan will produce, guaranteed.
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying there. That is the one thing. Like, I actually love AJ Dillon a lot. It's hard for me to argue against your ranking of him, but I do have him down so much lower because of the unknowable in the future. We know that this year he's going to be the RB2. He's like, they haven't shown any trace of trying to move on from Aaron Jones. He will be the RB2 this year. And then after that, we don't know. So, like, if he was to take if he got some Miles Sanders type contract, and I would love to see him ascend. He's one of the old school bruising backs, and then he showed us in his first couple of years that he actually has some passing game chops too. Like, he has decent hands for a man who is 250 freaking pounds. So I like seeing AJ Dillon play. I like the style of game that he has. But without knowing that he will move on to a better situation, I would hate to have him as my running back too. Like, with him ranked as RB23 for you, I just wouldn't take him as my running back too. But I would love to have him as an upside running back 3.
He's been a handcuff purgatory he's been in handcuff purgatory for so long, his entire career. And until I see an escape route for that, I gotta keep him where he is.
That is the Packers' fault for taking AJ Dillon when Aaron Rodgers had like 4 good years left. Is what they get. That's what AJ Dillon gets, I guess. They did not need a running back right there. They could have gave Aaron Rodgers a 2nd round wide receiver. Let's see, 4 years back. I can't think of just an off the top round 2 wide receiver from that draft class, but Aaron Rodgers would have done work with that, whoever that would have been. All right, Mason, you are back to back, sir. You got Brian Robinson here in tier 6. So to list them off really quick, we do have Alvin Kamara leading off tier 6, and I again do think that is just because they have added so many people to that running back room. But we'll move on. They got Devin A-Chain, James Conner, Brian Robinson Jr., Kendre Miller, Khalil Herbert, Antonio Gibson, and Roshan Johnson. All right.
So I like Brian Robinson because one thing is he only played 12 games last year and ran for 797 yards, which would have put him on pace for a 1,000-yard season, which is already a pretty impressive feat. Plus this with him coming off of a gunshot wound, which not the easiest injury to recover from, and he still came in and produced a good amount for the team. I think he's going to be I think he's going to be a good scoring addition for them. I think Washington might use him at the goal line a decent amount. I don't know. I think he's going to be a good thing. They went and got Chris Rodriguez Jr., right?
Yes.
Which I think he's going to be a great compliment. I think the faith in Antonio Gibson is kind of fading out. I think he only has 1 year left on his contract. And then I think he's gone. And then I think it's Chris Rodriguez and B-Rob to go. And I think Brian Robinson has him outbeat every single time because Chris Robinson was a late 6th round pick, I believe.
Early 6th round. Late 6th. He wasn't an undrafted, but he was late 6th.
Yeah. Which I don't know. I think it shows faith in B-Rob.
Okay.
I agree with that too. I mean, it's hard for me to fight with him too because I love him. He's perfect size for everything I want, but I don't trust what they got going on there. They're talking all this talk about Gibson. We have heard nothing about Robinson at all this offseason. And I do like because Chris Rodriguez. I like him a lot. I have him on my team. I've picked him up as a free agent. Didn't get drafted this year in our startup. So I got pretty high hopes for him as well.
I think I'm high on Antonio Gibson for the season, especially with Eric Bieniemy coming in. I do see with them losing J.D. McKissick that Antonio Gibson takes over that pass catching role. He is also still a big enough of a guy, so it's not like only Brian Robinson as the only at red zone option for them. If they get down towards the goal line, they can still put in Antonio Gibson, and Gibson has already showed that he can be an RB1 like early in his career. I still like Antonio Gibson a lot. I personally have him nine spots over Brian Robinson. That is not only because of what I think he can do this year, but what I think he can do if he doesn't stay with the Redskins. I think of all of the running backs going into their contract year, I think he's kind of on that Miles Sanders pedigree where he's not amazing to the point where he is going to be looking for the amount of money Eckler is going to be looking for next season, but he is still going to get a solid contract that people are actually willing to pay him in this running back market, and where he's still to the point where he will accept that money because he hasn't had an astounding career where he's putting up insane numbers, but he's still putting up pretty good numbers. So I just don't see the upside for Brian Robinson. He had 9 receptions last year, but I just don't see the Washington offense being great enough for him to just be a Jamal Williams. I will get that many touchdowns and prove my worth that way. And I don't see him having any usage in the passing game. So, all right, moving on to our next pick. Next pick.
Next
All
tier.
right, next tier we got Tyler Algier, Tank Bigsby, Tajay Spears, Damian Harris, Elijah Mitchell, Jamal Williams, Chase Brown, Samaje Perine, Jalen Warren, and Devin Singletary. So I personally have Elijah Mitchell ranked much higher than the rest of us here. I have Elijah Mitchell in my tier 7 as a running back 37, as the running back 37. The reason why I have him so high is because he produced at an elite amount last year just on the ground. So, of any running back that had at least 45 attempts, granted, the sample size is a little bit biased because he was injured a lot. He only had 45 attempts. But of any running back with 45 attempts, he had the most yards per carry at 6.2 yards per carry. That was just zero point 0.1 yards beyond Rashad Penny, which I think we all agree both of those two guys, little injury prone, but when they're on the field, they produce. He's also in the San Francisco backfield, which creates open space for guys with speed. So that's exactly Elijah Mitchell's game. That's all they need him to do. I think most people are concerned with Christian McCaffrey being there, understandably so. In redraft, probably the number one running back going off the boards, deservedly so.
Yep.
But last year, when they played together, Elijah Mitchell had 12.3 touches per game with McCaffrey in the lineup. That's a ton. That's more than enough to get him the amount of yards and touchdown upside that he needs. And then on top of it, when Christian McCaffrey was playing with Elijah Mitchell, he went from 23.5 touches per game to 15.6 touches per game when Mitchell was in the lineup. That shows me that they still like on top of him having the 12.3 touches per game, they still are saying like, okay, we're not just adding that to the mix. We're bringing Christian McCaffrey's touches down per game because we value Elijah Mitchell that much. So I just think between him being young, being on this team for another 2 years, and them showing that when you're healthy, we're still giving you touches, that he is deserving to be a little bit higher than the ECR has him right now.
Yeah, I think it's pretty fair for him. I have him right around the, where do I have him again here?
You have him at RB 46. I'm at RB 37. And then, I'm sorry, that was Mason's ranking. Mason, you have him at RB46.
Yeah.
And then you're at RB51.
Yeah, 51. So 51. So yeah, I'm the lowest out of everybody here too. So I should probably speak to that a little bit. But mainly it is just CMC. And they do have Jordan Mason. So I do know that if they want to spread the ball around a lot too, I could see him getting involved. I love Jordan Mason. I love me some Jordan.
Why?
Because he's efficient. He's a monster too.
Any more efficient than Elijah Mitchell?
Probably not, but he also wasn't given as much opportunity either.
I mean, as a Niner fan, Mitchell's so talented. McCaffrey just kind of is going to take away the carries, obviously. Mitchell's just very injury prone. And even as a backup, he's that injury prone where you never know. Jordan Mason, like you said, is great. But Shanahan, Lynch, they're known for drafting early running backs. So no running back is safe in the Niners backfield, I think.
That's the truth. That's really the truth. I took Trey Sermon early, and
you learned that lesson the hard way. Oh yeah,
that was tough. That was tough. A couple years back there. All right, so tier 8, we got Israel Abanikanda, Kenneth Gainwell, Rashad Penny, Deontay Foreman, Ezekiel Elliott. Here comes all the free agents: Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Kareem Hunt, Leonard Fournette, Evan Hall, Pierre Strong, and Jeff Wilson Jr. Of them, we have a significant standout here. I would say the most significant of any of these. We have Evan with Jeff Wilson all the way down here at running back 83. Yeah. What is going on? Why do you hate? This is now I'm actually speaking. Why do you hate Jeff Wilson Jr.?
Well, yeah, he just moved into the bottom of my list, and I don't think he's planning on moving out anytime soon. He moved in mainly because he didn't have the most rushing or receiving attempts at all last year. That went to Mostert. He had the most in his entire career with 176 rushing attempts last year. That was the most in his career by 50 attempts. And he finished as a fringe RB2-3. His catch percentage is in the 50s. Not great. Very crowded running back room right now. And it could get even more crowded with Dalvin Cook, because I think that's still the best place for him. And, I love Devin Achane. In the draft, they answered to the running back position. Devin Achane, great draft capital, loaded with speed, and, expected to get pretty involved here year one as well. So I don't see where there's enough room for Jeff Wilson.
All right.
Yeah, I think his value entirely depends if Cook goes there.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief because I know we got our other boys coming on soon.
Yeah.
But last year, bottom line, so he with the Dolphins specifically averaged 70 total yards per game and about 2 catches per game.
Yeah.
That's 9 points per game for where I have him ranked as my running back 48. That's your RB4 getting you 9 points per game in PPR. That's not too bad. I'll just leave it at that. I think that Achane threats more to Mostert than Wilson in terms of their similarity in game, being speed breakers, but I'll leave it at that. All right, so in the last tier, we got Deuce Vaughn, Keontae Ingram, Isaiah Spiller, Zach Evans, Chuba Hubbard, Eric Gray, and Joshua Kelly. I have Deuce Vaughn as my RB75. I personally, so if this Fantasy Pros ECR was to continue, Deuce Vaughn is their ECR 75. I am dead on to Fantasy Pros expert consensus ranking. I feel like y'all have to explain yourself more than I have to explain myself. But that's not how this show works. So I'll explain myself. Deuce Vaughn is 5'5", 179 pounds. We do not see running backs like this in the NFL. If there is to be a running back to compare to him, I would say it is Tariq Cohen, who has had 1 year of fantasy success, not much more than that. I think Tony Pollard takes the bulk work. I think that Malik Davis, if anything, spells Tony Pollard, especially with the more valuable touches towards the red zone. And I think, if anything, if they don't sign Tony Pollard, that Deuce Vaughn could show that he could be valuable as the pass catching role in years to come. But I don't see that being this year. I don't see it being a very valuable person for the long run. He's not going to have that 3 down back type of value. And I think if it does come down to it, they'll bring in somebody else next year rather than rely on Deuce Vaughn.
Yeah, my justification is going to be less on the size, and the numbers behind that, and more on just like the Cinderella story behind it. His dad literally did the draft call, his personality. He's such a hard worker. Those types of things, and the fact that he's so young, and they're gonna give him a chance. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's hard to argue. Sorry,
I think he could move into the backup role behind Pollard, and that team is supposed to be moving towards a run-based offense, I guess. So
supposed to be, right? Yeah. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. All right. With that being said, we got our last bit here.
Yep.
Evan, take it away.
So if you do like this show, you should also check out Fifth Down Territory. Stadium Rant's live, relentless NFL coverage starts every Tuesday, 8 p.m. with Lamb, Bahuki, Shane and Louie debating the toss and hitting you with the impact block on a weekly basis. Unfiltered scorchers, always spoken. Parental supervision, always advised. And then Dan's got the fun stat this week. What you got for us?
Let's go, baby. All right. So our fun stat for the end of this episode. There is one team that has never had a 4,000-yard passer. Be sure to take a guess. Next week, if we get enough viewers, let's say we got 10 live viewers, I will take a pause, let you guess who it is. If you have the right guess, congratulations. We ain't got no gear for you yet, but you might like and subscribe, and maybe we'll get there. All right. After that, take it easy. Watch the next episode coming on. We got Fifth Down Territory starting pretty much right now.
Right now. Let's go.
Peace, boys.